All right. So I got a question. It's actually not so much a question, but a request for me to comment on. I don't know if you saw this story, but this is a truly horrible story and something that, anyway. So, there's been a lot of discussion of admissions to colleges and the standards by which colleges use to admit students. And of course, we just saw the whole corruption scandal where parents were paying off coaches and paying off professors, paying off admissions officers, pretending their students were athletes, or pretending their kids were athletes, or pretending their kids were faking their test results, or all kinds of stuff, or just writing a big fat check to an admission officer that then let them in. So that's kind of an obvious way in which the system has been gamed, and the system and just partially shows how corrupt and really, really bad the system really is. But on top of that, you've got a problem that since affirmative action, American colleges have tried to figure out how to, make themselves more diverse, and particularly given the history of exclusion of universities, top universities not taking blacks, top universities not taking Jewish students. The universities wanted to fix that and to amend that. And they started introducing a variety of different parameters in addition to performance, right? In addition to kind of test performance, or in addition to kind of the classical ability-based metrics, in order to achieve a certain level of diversity. And of course, my view is, if you're a private university, you can use whatever the hell criteria you want in order to accept, and you should be able to be allowed to discriminate in any way you want, and so on. Just don't lie about it. Just tell us exactly what the criteria are, and so be it. We can play the game, right? And everybody knows who you accept and who you don't, and that'll be it. But of course, we have anti-discrimination laws in the United States. So if a university is shown to be discriminatory and not allowed, for example, blacks and are not allowed Jews in, then they could get into big trouble. So they have to have those groups represented in some way, or to show and prove that they didn't discriminate against them. So universities started to have, in a sense, quotas. Then the Supreme Court ruled that the universities can't have quotas, that's discrimination as well, that they shouldn't have quotas. So universities try to come up with other measures that would proxy for race, or proxy for the kind of diversity they wanted to create, and use those measures. And I got a quote here from this one guy at Georgetown. He says the purpose of these kind of other variables is, the purpose is to get to race without using race. And we'll get what variables they're using in order to do this, right? Of course, there's a lot of racism in just implying that, or at least a lot of stereotyping in order to even do that. So you've got universities in kind of a quandary. Harvard is being sued right now because they have discriminated, or the claim is that they have discriminated against Asians. That is, Asians outperform other groups on test results, but they are underrepresented in Harvard, considering their overperformance of test results. So there's a whole group now, including the Trump administration, that is suing Harvard over discrimination against Asians. Now, all of this is a consequence of the fact that we have anti-discrimination laws. It's all a consequence of that provision in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that makes discrimination illegal. And of course, discrimination based on race, sex, sexual orientation, I don't know what else they've, a disability, I think, and a bunch of other criteria. So it forces universities to have these convoluted, perverse, crazy standards by which to accept students into their student body. Of course, add to that the ideology of multiculturalism and the ideology of egalitarianism and the ideology driving much of the liberal arts universities in the United States, where people advocate for not using ability as the standard to get into college, because that just perpetuates privilege, what they call privilege. It just perpetuates kind of the advantages you have from because of where you were born and so on. And you get a complete and utter mess. So admissions into many universities in the United States are complete disaster. Complete disaster. By the way, for example, one way in which Texas has dealt with this is Texas basically has made it so that the University of Texas, right, the flagship of the Texas state schools, has to accept the top 10% of every high school class in Texas. So that way they get diversity, because you get the top 10% of inner city schools, the top 10% of rich public schools. You get the diversity implied. But of course, you also you don't get a standard of quality, right? Because there's no standardized test. I'm not saying standardized tests are the best way to do this. And again, I don't have an answer to how universities should have admissions. I just think we should leave it up to every university to figure it out. And again, if they want to discriminate, they should be allowed to discriminate. So Texas does not go by ability. So a lot of kids who might be at the 11th percentiles in some really, really, really hard schools, where being in the 11th percentiles is amazing, are not going to get into the University of Texas, where somebody who is in the 9th percentile of a pretty poor school will get in, even though the one in the 11th percentile is better academically than the one in the 9th percentile. So again, all over the country, and again, this was a consequence of the Supreme Court ruling. I think it was the University of Texas case. There was also a University of Michigan case where they couldn't use race as the standard. So universities are in this quandary because they use criteria and then they get sued based on criteria, and each one of them uses different criteria, and they don't know which one to use, and they don't know how to use it, and it's just confusing to them. So in order to solve this quandary universities are having, the College Board is the entity, the nonprofit, that puts together and administers the SAT tests. So they're the ones that actually provide the universities with what is perceived, at least by some, and again, I have no opinion about this, as good standardized tests to be able to measure student ability. So the College Board now is going to add something to just the SAT score that they're going to send the universities. In addition to an SAT score, they are going to send another score, and that score is going to try to capture the student's social and economic background. So it's called, what are they calling this? They're calling this a hardship score, right? It's basically going to measure your, quote, privilege. I've said I hate that word. I hate the way it's used. I think it's offensive. It's disgusting, but that's what they're using, right? So I think the formal name for this by the College Board is an adversity index. It's an adversity index. So how much adversity have you faced in your life? So for example, they are going to look at your address, and from that, they're going to figure out, here are the criteria from what they have released, right? They're going to look at the neighborhood crime rate. They're going to look at vacancies, at poverty rates, at housing values, at family median income, parental education level, and marital status. Are you divorced? Like divorced, you get an extra score for adversity. I guess if your parents are married and they hate each other's guts and they yell at each other all day long, and you have a lousy, horrible, upbringing because they didn't get divorced, that is not a hardship because they can't measure it. All right. Anyway, marital status, whether your parents spoke English as a first language, the rates at which graduates from your high school matriculated into four-year colleges, and the number of advanced placement classes your school offered, not how many you took, that the school offered, and the opportunity to take advantage of free lunch, not the Milton Friedman free lunch, the welfare state free lunch, right? They're going to take all this and they're going to give you a score. And the higher the score, the more adversity you faced in life. And therefore, what they're telling the universities are, you can now choose how to use these two scores. One is the SAT score, how good you are, let's say, how good you are in academics. And the other is how adverse your life was, how unprivileged you are, how little privilege you might have had. And then the schools can then balance the two out and choose. You know, different schools will probably weight the two indexes or the two scores differently. Now, this is nuts. This is nuts. It's immoral. It's this is altruism in action, guys. Altruism in action. Altruism tells us that the more a person needs, the more deserving they become. Or another way to phrase this is the more adversity somebody has faced, the more they deserve, the more stuff they deserve to be redistributed from others. So if somebody faced adversity, then no matter their ability, no matter even how hard they actually worked, they should be allowed in. Now, look, universities have always taken some of this into account, right? You write an essay, and a lot of the essays have to do with hardships you might have encountered in life. And it was and they judged you based on the quality of the essay, but also based on the content of it. They ask you a lot of questions in the applications, and they could always find people who've, I admire people greatly admire people who've grown up in really, really bad circumstances and still achieved something. And I think that shows a work ethic. It shows, most importantly, it shows the choices the individual has made. You can see, because they overcome adversity, you can see that they've engaged their free will, they've engaged their reason, they've engaged and made right choices. Right? They've engaged their thinking tool in order to advance in life. And that's fantastic. And to the extent that you can capture that, yeah, you want people like that at your university. But I don't get a sense that that's what's being captured here. Although maybe by combining the adversity goal with all the other scores that a university has, a adversity index, but just having an index like this that has weightings on all these different things is just stupid. There's so many other ways. Again, a university could be able to find those ambitious, what Ayn Rand called the ambitious poor, the people who are ambitious, who grew up under bad circumstances but are ambitious. And you want to reward ambition, particularly if it's led to good performance. But this is the opposite. This is the attempt to reward need. And this is the attempt, more importantly, to punish what they call privilege. Because you might have been born to a middle-class family, or to God forbid, to a wealthy family. Because your parents might have been educated. Because your parents might be actually born in America. Because they might have divorced or whatever, or not divorced, stayed married. You get penalized. Why? You might be just as ambitious as the other kids. You could have worked as hard. And of course, you might be just as intelligent or more intelligent. And now we're going to penalize you. And of course, at the end of the day, morality, the morality of altruism always is geared towards penalizing the good. And I'm not here talking about and the good and the able at the expense of the needy. And this is about knocking down. It's about one more, by the way, the students will get their adversity score. Only the universities will. But imagine if those start leaking and we'll all have adversity scores and we'll all be able to tell each other what our adversity score is. And, oh, you've got a high adversity score, so I have to admire you because you're a needy person, and I have a low adversity score, so I have to apologize constantly because I'm so-called privileged. I mean, this is the consequence of altruism and a nihilistic desire to hurt those who are able, and an irrational desire to help those in need because they're in need by sacrificing those who have. And to a large extent, this is influenced by John Rawls's idea, that egalitarian idea, that the standard for success of any society is how the least able, the most needy in society are doing. And that everything in the end should be sacrificed for them because they are the standard. So, I mean, this is truly horrific. And the fact that the universities don't have the guts to do this themselves, the fact that now they've had to outsource them to the College Board, tells you a little bit about what's going on in universities and the pressure they're in, and kind of how once you open this can of worms, there's no end to it. It's just one mess after another mess after another mess, and there's no objective standard. And again, different universities should set different goals and should have their own standard based on those goals. All right, you know, and somebody, I read an article about this, and they said, you know, of course, this can be gamed too. You know, parents can get divorced in order to get their kids into a better school. Parents can move into a lousy neighborhood in order to get their kids into a better, and believe me, there will be parents who do this, to get their kids into a better university. So parents are going to game this, just like they gamed any other standards when they come out. Parents are going to try to game this, and game this in a way that provides very perversive, weird, just stupid incentives for people, in terms that maybe they should beat their kids up once in a while, so the kid can say, I come from a abusive family. Maybe because that'll help them in the adversity index, help them get into a better university. It really is troubling to see the extent to which altruism plays into these kind of rules of the game, the way society functions and the way society is structuring itself. And it's impacting more and more and more of our institutions as we move forward. I mean, you get this in the workplace, you get it at universities, and I mean, it hasn't impacted the workplace quite as much, but you still get all these sensitivity training and all this nonsense at the workplace. And again, all of this starts with a legitimate grievance: racism, sexism, people behaving badly towards other people in the workplace. So none of this stuff is completely random. And what gives it the semblance of legitimacy is that it is presented as solving a problem. But this is the wrong way to solve a problem. The way to solve a problem is to go back to what America was built on, to go back to Martin Luther King's famous statement, to become colorblind, sex blind, at least. You don't always want to be sex blind. There are important ways in which you want to know the other purpose of sex. But in terms of moral character, to evaluate people based on their ability. And every university should set up its own criteria of what that ability looks like. Oh, some universities could say, we're not about ability. We're about something else. Okay, just let us know what it is. And it would be good if we're going to have a good, healthy, productive university system, higher educational system, that these criteria be rational criteria, not irrational. All right, that was all.
And let me start by quoting from a review of this novel, Atlas Shrugged, that appeared in Newsweek. It said that you are out to destroy almost every edifice in the contemporary American way of life, our Judeo-Christian religion, our modified government-regulated capitalism, our rule by the majority will. Other reviews have said that you scorn churches and the concept of God. Are these accurate criticisms?
Yes, I agree with the facts, but not the estimate of this criticism. Namely, if I am challenging the base of all these institutions, I'm challenging the moral code of altruism, the precept that man's moral duty is to live for others, that man must sacrifice himself to others, which is the present-day morality.
What do you
Since
mean by sacrifice himself for others? This, now we're getting to the point.
One moment. Since I'm challenging the base, I necessarily would challenge the institutions you named, which are a result of that morality.
All right.
And now what is self-sacrifice?
Yes, what is self-sacrifice? You say that you do not like the altruism by which we live. You like a certain kind of Ayn Randist selfishness.
I would say that I don't like is too weak a word. I consider it evil. And self-sacrifice is the precept that man needs to serve others in order to justify his existence, that his moral duty is to serve others. That is what most people believe today.
Well, yes, we're taught to feel concerned for our fellow man, to feel responsible for his welfare, to feel that we are, as religious people might put it, children under God and responsible one for the other. Now, why do you rebel? What's wrong with this philosophy?
But that is what, in fact, makes man a sacrificial animal. That man must work for others, concern himself with others, or be responsible for them. That is the role of a sacrificial object. I say that man is entitled to his own happiness and that he must achieve it himself, but that he cannot demand that others give up their lives to make him happy. And nor should he wish to sacrifice himself for the happiness of others. I hold that man should have self-esteem.